What is normal anxiety? So first of all, it's important to know that anxiety is a normal emotion that we all experience. So there's a reason why we've evolved over millions of years to still have anxiety. Anxiety helps us to look both ways when we cross the street. It helps us to study for a test. It helps us when we're on the soccer field paying attention in the moment. Anxiety helps us prepare for goals. It helps to keep us safe. I like to think of anxiety as a small fire alarm in our brain. And it's meant to go off when there's danger, when there's something we need to prepare for, when there's a goal we need to motivate for. When is anxiety less helpful? Sometimes this fire alarm goes off, whether because of past experiences or anxiety sensitivity, when we're making toast, metaphorically, when there's not a major danger. So this might look like, in the examples I gave before, you're sitting down to take a test and you start to feel really panicky. Your breathing starts increasing. It feels hard to even focus on the moment. Or you're on the soccer field and you feel paralyzed by indecision. It feels hard to move towards the ball. You feel scared, like, I don't know what to do. Everyone's gonna judge me. So in these moments, anxiety starts to get to a level that's not helpful. And when I'm working with kids and teens at the clinic, I tend to look for anxiety that is distressing, that feels bigger than the moment calls for, is interfering in daily life, and is getting in the way with their goals. So for most people, anxiety latches onto the things that we care about most. So if you care a lot about academics and academic curiosity, doing well in school, you might spend hours worrying over schoolwork. Anxiety might pull away the joy and the curiosity of learning. If you're someone who cares a lot about relationships, what other people think about you, social connections, anxiety might make you so afraid of judgment that it feels paralyzing or hard to make decisions for yourself. So those are the moments when anxiety gets to a more unhelpful level and gets in the way of what we want to do. So how should adults interact or intervene with anxiety? So there are three main things I think of that can be helpful, both for mild levels of anxiety and more severe levels of anxiety. The first is validation. So validation, I think of as a word we hear a lot in pop culture. A lot of people aren't sure, what does validation mean? Does this mean I let my kid do whatever they want when they're anxious, or that I'm not allowed to push them when they're anxious? So what validation means is communicating that someone's emotion makes sense in the moment. And it can actually feel scary to do this sometimes, and it might intensify the emotion. And what we know about validation is it actually does the opposite. It provides relief. It makes people feel better. So one example that comes to mind for validation would be on the first day of school. So let's say your child comes to you on the first day of school and says, I am so anxious, I'm nervous about the other kids, the teachers, all these different components. It can be really tempting to actually do the opposite of validation and jump in and minimize or dismiss the anxiety. So to say something like, don't be anxious, it's gonna be great, don't worry about it, it's gonna be a great first day. And even though this is really well intended, what it tends to do is it communicates you shouldn't be feeling anxious right now, other people aren't feeling anxious, and there's something wrong if you don't have a great day. And this can actually intensify anxiety in the moment and create secondary emotions like shame or guilt over feeling this way. And so it can feel counterintuitive, but validation in that moment would look like saying something like, it makes total sense you feel anxious. It's the first day of school, of course you feel anxious. Or I remember feeling anxious on the first day of school. So communicating that emotion makes sense. It makes sense why you're feeling that given the situation. So that would be my first piece of advice. Second, to lean into brave behavior. So it can be really tempting when kids are feeling anxious to try to pull away whatever it is that's making them feel anxious. And in the short term, that can feel really helpful. And what tends to happen is in the long term is that this communicates that kids can't handle that anxiety-provoking situation. It tends to pull them away from their goals. So we want to reinforce and praise any time a child does anything that involves brave behavior, moving towards the thing that makes them anxious and is actually safe. So for example, if a kid is really afraid of going to a birthday party because they don't know all the other kids there, this might look like telling them, could you go and talk to one person that you know there that you feel closer to? And then giving them some praise for that. And then maybe stepping out of the room and giving them some more time there at the birthday party. Really pushing in a step-by-step way, brave behavior and reinforcing that. And lastly, normalizing anxiety. I think oftentimes in our culture, we don't normalize it. It is completely typical to feel emotions like anxiety, shame, sadness. These are a part of life. And so I like to give examples from my own life that are developmentally appropriate in ways that I've coped with anxiety. So for example, the other day I was driving and I noticed there was a spider crawling on the roof of my car above my head. And I am very afraid of spiders. So I had to keep on driving, I had to stay calm and wait till the next red light when I could flick the spider out the window. And I think this is a great example of sharing in a developmentally appropriate way a time that I felt anxious, a time a teacher felt anxious, a parent felt anxious, and being able to show that brave behavior and normalize anxiety, that we all feel this way. There's nothing wrong or scary about feeling anxiety. And lastly, just to emphasize some things that I think can inadvertently increase anxiety that are unhelpful when a child's feeling anxious. That minimizing or dismissing, that saying things like, don't feel anxious, it's not a big deal, you shouldn't feel this way in the moment. And additionally, reacting in a big emotional way to anxiety or showing your own anxiety in the moment. So going back to that first day of school example, if a kid comes up to you or your child comes up to you and says, I'm so nervous about the first day of school, saying something like, oh no, should we call the teachers? Is this gonna be too much for you? I feel nervous about this. Really reinforcing this idea that anxiety is in some way dangerous or there's something scary about this. So in summary, anxiety is normal. It is something we all feel. It tends to become more challenging if it becomes interfering in our life, distressing and pulling us away from our goals. And that validation, normalizing, and reinforcing brave behavior can be really helpful in the moment.